Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is the Great Big History Podcast. Today, we talk about the Assyrian Empire and how they actually ran the thing. The Assyrians are, as I probably mentioned, what happens if the Nazis win. That's what they are. And there may be historians of Assyria who will say they did these great things, and that may be true. But nobody has anything nice to say about them. Nobody. Not even the Assyrians. Not even the Assyrians say nice things about the Assyrians. But mostly what we have about them is stuff that their enemies wrote. The Old Testament from the Hebrews, that is going to be written down later, but it's going to be remembered. All of these traumas are going to be remembered. And stuff from the Babylonians. And then the stuff that we have from the Assyrians isn't very nice either. So it's really, the Assyrians are what happens when the Nazis win. So if Hitler wanted the Third Reich to be a 1,000-year Reich, to be a new Roman Empire, he was kidding himself. It wasn't going to last that long. But the Assyrian Empire lasts 300 years. How? Well, they invent terrorism. Like I said, they're what happens when the Nazis win. They invent the concept of what we would call state-sponsored terrorism. The idea of a country committing terror in order to get its way. So how does this work? Terrorism is not war, and it's not violence. It's a particular type of both. It has a very particular purpose. And the idea of that is to maintain legitimacy by people being too scared to revolt. The people will not challenge the authority because they are too scared of what will happen to them. The Romans will do this when they destroy Carthage, or they decimate a group. Decimate literally means to kill 1 out of every 10, to kill 10%. But for terrorism to be terrorism, it requires a credible threat of violence plus propaganda. It requires people to think you can do the very thing you say you can do. Plus, people have to know about it. So the schoolyard bully is a terrorist. Because when he says, "Give me your lunch money or I'll beat you up," the third grader who gives up his lunch money believes it, has heard stories that this bully will beat him up, and that this bully can beat him up or her up. That there's a credible threat of violence. Plus propaganda. People have to know it. And so what we see is the Assyrians doing things and then telling people about it. That is really just astounding what they do. So this is what Ashurbanipal wrote about himself. Susa, the great holy city, abode of their gods. Now Susa is down the rivers, up into the mountains in Persia or so. I don't know. It's in the kingdom of Elam at the time. There is no Persia. But it's not in Mesopotamia. It's in the mountains. It's on the other side of the mountains, over the Tigris. It ain't close. Susa, the great holy city, abode of their gods, seat of their mysteries, I conquered. Okay, makes sense. I entered its palaces. Okay. I opened their treasuries, where silver and gold, goods and wealth were amassed. Fair enough. I destroyed the ziggurat of Susa. All right, Now, this is still fairly typical. You destroy the abode of their gods. That shows that you're powerful and that their gods are weak. That their gods, remember, the number one role of gods is protection. Protection from nature, protection from other peoples. And so if you destroy their temples, it shows their gods are weak. This fairly typical. It's not nice, but it's fairly typical. I smashed its copper horns. All right, I destroyed the statues of their gods. I reduced the temples of Elam to nothing. All right, we're getting a little. You could have just burned them down. To obliterate the temples, to tear them down, so that there's no stones left, is a bit much. Their gods and their goddesses I scattered to the wind. Okay, you could have kept them and brought them up to Nineveh. The tombs of their ancient and recent kings I devastated. I exposed to the suns. I carried away the bones toward the land of Ashur, which is his homeland, which is Assyria. Now, wait a minute. That means he went into the cemeteries. He went to the burial grounds. He dug up the bodies of dead kings. Dragged out their bones. Wrapped them up, put them on carts, and he carried them away. Like, think about what you had to do. You had to have the shovels. You got to get the people. You got to have people tell you where the kings were. You had to go find the kings. You then had to break into their tombs because kings don't usually want people breaking into their tombs. So, like, WTF, man. And it's not done yet. I, Ashurbanipal, devastated the provinces of Elam, and their lands I sowed with salt. And that tells you how messed up this is. Sowing the lands with salt, as you know, if you know from your Romans, is to make sure that nothing grows there again. It's shorthand for I utterly wrecked the place. There's nothing. There's nothing left. And there won't ever be anything there again. But think about the logistics of this. If he actually did this, that means he had to bring the salt. That means he had to start in Nineveh, up in Ashur, up in Assyria, way up at the northern Tigris. And he had to go, I'm going to fight the king of Elam. I'm going to go to Susa, which is like 1,000 miles away. I'm going to go down the rivers. I'm going to go across the Euphrates. I'm going to go across the Tigris. I'm going to go up into the mountains. I'm going to get onto the Persian-Iranian plateau. I'm going to go to Susa. I'm going to win a series of battles. I'm going to lay siege to their city. I'm going to break into their city. I am going to obliterate all that while feeding my army, equipping my army, keeping my army happy, entertaining my army, and carrying hundreds, if not thousands, of carts worth of salt. Just in case I feel angry at the time. That means I have to get the carts. I have to get the teamsters. I have to get the oxen. Because we don't have draft horses. So I get the oxen. The oxen need to eat, the teamsters need to be paid, and the carts need to be bought. All of which requires money and food, which I have to now bring, which means I need more carts, more teamsters, more oxen to bring the food, to feed the carts, to feed the oxen who are bringing my salt, just in case I want to sow it with salt. Then I have to actually do this, which means I have to go to these fields. I have to bring the carts out. I have to get my men with shovels, or they have to take slaves and give them shovels, and then we have to plow. We have to get plows. Like, the act. It's one thing to say it, but the act of sowing the fields with salt is so beyond the pale of how one would ordinarily act. Like, just to say it, just the logistics of doing it is like, wow, you guys are messed up. And that's what we have. Their idea was exterminate. the utter destruction of other people. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing, I went to their city and I broke in. I took their money. All right. I destroyed their giant temple. Okay. I smashed all their gods. All right. I smashed and destroyed all of their temples. Well, that's a bit much. I unburied their kings and dragged them back to my capital. That's really messed up. And then I sold all of their lands with their fields with salt so nothing will grow there again. That's completely messed up. Their idea was to exterminate. Like out of Doctor Who. And they have siege equipment that looks like it's out of Doctor Who. Exterminate. Exterminate. And that's what the Assyrians did. So are they able to commit that violence? And yes, they are. With that professional army. With that national army. They are. They sack Babylon in 730. And when you sack Babylon, it's the largest city in the world. Everybody knows about it. It is the 9/11 of its day. Sacking Babylon goes out to everybody. Because everyone, one, lives there. And so when they leave, when they scatter, when they run away, they tell everybody what's happened. So they sack Babylon in 730. Which means everybody else knows. Every other little city, every other dinky little people know that the Assyrians are somebody to be, not somebody to be messed with. Then they committed the genocide of the 10 tribes of Israel. They roll in, and we're going to talk about this more when we do Israel, but they roll into the kingdom of Israel, which is not all of the Hebrew people. It's only the northern kingdom, and obliterate the place 5 years later. They pick up the people, and they scatter them throughout the empire. 85% of Hebrews disappear, are gone, are wiped off the map. It is a trauma for the Hebrews of Judah who were left behind. It is so not only can the Assyrians attack and win and sack, steal from the largest city in the world, they can obliterate, wipe off the map, cease to exist, small peoples too. And then they invade Egypt, the richest country in the world, just to be sure, in 670 BC. Now, invading Egypt is a big deal. You have to get a navy, which means you have to own the cities of Phoenicia, because they're really the only people with boats. They're the only people with the wood to make the boats. You have to own the cities of Phoenicia. You have to make them make your boats. Now, they like trading with Egypt. They're not big on the whole invading Egypt. They don't need to. They can trade with Egypt. So to make them make naval warships is a whole nother level. So you own the Phoenician cities. You're then making them build warships rather than trade ships. You're then having to get all the water, because you have to cross 2 deserts. You have to cross the semi-arid lands of Judea, of southern Israel. And then you have to cross the Sinai Desert, one of the driest deserts in the world, to invade it. And then you have to fight in Egypt, the richest place in the world. So if you want to invade Egypt, you really have to want to invade Egypt. And they do it in 670 BC. And they cart off the wealth. They cart off the gods. They cart off the people as slaves. They scatter them. They pick them up and they move them all different places. We are talking utter wreckage of societies, of civilizations in the Middle East. So what do they do for propaganda? Well, they build a city. Wait, what? They build a city? Yeah, they build a city. Remember that the way people understood power was Babylon. Babylon was the richest city in the world. So people understood a civilization's power by the size of its city. If you had a big city, you were important. If you had a little city, You weren't that important. So everyone builds cities. The Egyptians are the only people who could get away with not having cities. Because one, they have the Nile. They're the richest people in the whole wide world. It's kind of undeniable. And two, they got things like pyramids. Like, they got other things to show off. And when we get to the Egyptian section, we'll talk about that. But in Mesopotamia, if you want to be considered serious, you need a big city. It's like you're not a real city until you have a skyscraper or a bunch of skyscrapers. You're just not. And so, yes, they conquer Babylon. And people go, yeah, that's great. You conquer Babylon. All right. Where's your city? You're still living in tents, right? So the Assyrians need to build a city. And so they build Nineveh. It's going to be their capital. Now, you have to understand, why would this be propaganda for terror? Why would this be the thing that makes people scared? And the idea is, it's built to do exactly that. It's like Albert Speer's New Germania, New Berlin. The Nazis had the idea. Hitler had the idea. And he had Albert Speer do this. And there's a whole model, and I have pictures in the video, of leveling Berlin. A city that's easily medieval, if not ancient. But in 1945, it's a fairly old city. And leveling it. Just leveling it. And then rebuilding this giant new Rome. Like, it has a dome, it has a Colosseum, it has these giant boulevards. It is Rome. It is going to be the new Rome. It's going to be this capital. Berlin was not considered awesome enough to be the capital of a 1,000-year empire. And let's face it, it wasn't. It was too small. German kings lived over in Potsdam. They didn't live in Berlin. All the great Nazi stuff is done in Nuremberg, which is why we had the trials against Nazis there, not in Berlin. Like, the Nazi home is Munich. The Nazi great propaganda movies and marches and all that happened in Nuremberg. Like, Berlin just didn't work the way the Nazis wanted it to work. And so it didn't reflect awesomeness. And so they needed to make it awesome. And so they were going to rebuild it. And that's what Nineveh is. Nineveh is not a city where people live. It's the anti-Babylon. It is about power. It is about size. It is about what I can make you do. Who's going to build Nineveh? Slaves are going to build Nineveh. What's the purpose of Nineveh? To give your tribute there. That when your tax day comes, you get all your money on your carts, you go up to Nineveh, and you show up. And what is Nineveh full of? War memorials. Kind of like Washington, D.C. Memorials to how we defeated you. So when you got up with your $1 million or $5 million up to Nineveh with your carts, you get up there and you go to the main gate, and the big main gate would show off. It would be bigger than your main gate. And you'd have been able to see the spires of the city from far away. They would have made sure that you could see the city before, kind of like Disney World, like the Magic Kingdom, that you see it before you get there. Except Disney World is a land of happiness and you're excited to get there, whereas Nineveh is a land of death and terror. So you get there, and there's going to be a guy with his clipboard, and he's going to say, oh, you're the little dinky city we conquered 5 years ago. Okay. You're going to go in through the main gate. You're going to make a left. You're going to go 5 blocks. You're going to make a right. You're going to go 10 blocks. You're going to make another right, go 2 blocks. You're going to make a left, go 3 blocks. You'll see it. Pay your tribute there. And they go, oh, okay, I'll do what I'm told. And so they follow those directions. Where is that? Where are they paying their treasury? Boom. You're going to get up to the place with your carts and all your money at the memorial to the dedication of your defeat. Not your defeat, your grandfather's defeat. And there will be Ashurbanipal. It's 10 feet tall. On his chariot, running over your grandfather, stabbing him in the head. That's going to be the war memorial. It's the equivalent of the President of the United States meeting the Prime Minister of Japan or of Germany in Washington, D.C. at the World War II Memorial. And be like, look around. Isn't this nice? I'm so glad we got to meet. And you came to meet me, and we took a walk, and here we are. Oh, look at all of the battles we defeated you in. Wow. Oh, let's talk now. Let's negotiate. Like, that's what we're talking about. The city was there to remind you of what the Assyrians did to you. Second, they built a library. Yeah, they built a library. Now, you may not like to read, but I doubt you've ever thought of a library as terrorist. Osama bin Laden, in his wildest dreams, never thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to open a library. That will teach him. So how is a library propaganda for power? Well, you have to think about how the library works. Like, you think of the library as a nice, wonderful place where you go in and you get what you want and you leave. But it doesn't really work that way. And if your town has the library that's split into a children's section and adult section, you have more of an inkling about how the library works. Okay, so you want a book. So what do you have to do? The first thing is you want knowledge. You have to decide you want knowledge. So what's in the library? In the library is knowledge. It's other people's knowledge. The Assyrians are not big readers. They're not big writers. They won. They don't care about what other people wrote about. They defeated them. The other people suck, which means their knowledge sucks. So I don't need to care. But they care about what they wrote, which means I want it. So the Great Library, first of all, is not filled with Assyrian stuff. It's filled with other people's stuff. Remember, the Assyrians conquered the 3 major parts of the world. They conquered the world as they understood it. So you burn stuff down, so you pick up their books, and you carry them off to Nineveh. Okay. So, what happens? Well, you're a dinky little people, and you say, I want my book. I need to know what the rain god wants me to do. And so, you get in your cart, and you go the 3-month journey up the rivers to Nineveh. And this is what happens. When you go and use a library, think about what happens. The first thing is, the library has to be open. Oh, gee, shucks, the library's not open. I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I can't get a book. I guess I got to hang out for more days. When is it going to open? That's going to cost me money. And food. And I don't want to be here. Nineveh's scary. So the first thing is, they don't have to be open. The library has the books. It could be closed. So the first thing is they have to let you in. And you may not know this, but this happens with archives a lot. You have to get permission to walk in and use the archives. You have to write to the archivist, and go, hey, I like to look at, things about Charles X Gustav of Sweden. Do you think it'd be okay? Because, I'm a foreigner and I'd really like to know your history more and write a book about it because no one in English has ever written a book about it. And they can say no. And then you can't go in. Because if you show up and you say, I'd like to take a look at your books about Charles X Gustav, they say, you made a whole trip for nothing because we ain't giving them to you. The Great Library shows domination because you walk into a library. First, it has to be open. Second, you have to be allowed in there. Third, You have to be able to find what you're looking for. If you ever use the Rose Library in New York, you know how this works. Archives work the same way. You don't have books on shelves. Not real books, not the books you want. Like, they're for show, the books on the shelves. You have to go to the librarian. You have to go to the archivist and say, I want this book, and this is where you can find it. And that librarian says, yeah, I'm about to go to lunch. I don't think I'm going to. Or they say, yeah, all right, I'll find it for you. Like, you don't have access. Somebody has to bring it to you. So they could, again, say no. But even if they bring it to you and you say, okay, great, I want to take this out. I want to leave with it. I want to write it all down. I want to photocopy it. I want to photograph it. They still can say no. You can't leave with it. Like, if you're a kid and you go into the adult section of the book of your library and you find some really cool Danielle Steele, Stephen King books, or, something even more quote-unquote adult, and you like the pictures in it, you're like, hey, I want to take this picture book out. It's funny. That librarian's going to say, no. And where's your mommy? No. Where's the adult you're supposed to be with? You can't have this book. You're not allowed. So a library can be used to show domination because you want the knowledge. And the Assyrians, one, don't care about the knowledge, and two, want to make a point to show who's in charge. And there's several steps along the way they can do that. They can say no. They can say you can't. They can say try me. And what are you going to do? So you go up there and you're like, I like the books about the rain god. I have to do a rain dance soon. Oh, do you think it'll be okay? And they say, when's your rain dance due? When does your God demand you to do your rain dance? Oh, in about 3 weeks. I mean, it took a while to get up here. So if I get the book today, I can go back and take care of it. All will be well. Oh, yeah, you know what? We were just about to close, and we're going to be closed for 3 weeks. And a half. Come back then. Good luck with your rain god. Sucks to be you if he's pissed off. Bye. Shuts the shutters. So the Assyrians took the city and turned it into propaganda for terror. And then they took the library, the idea of a library, and turned it into propaganda for terror. Why? What are the advantages of this? Well, there are 3. 1, you get what you want without violence. You get people to do what you want them to do without having to commit violence. You commit violence once, and then you get people to do what you want them to do. Why? Because 2, people will police themselves. People are scared something bad is going to happen to them. So what do? They make sure themselves not to do anything wrong. They police themselves, and that creates order for the Assyrians. Again, you get what you want without violence. You commit violence the first time, and then you don't have to do it again. Because you get people to police themselves. Think about kids and Santa Claus. Santa Claus is a terrorist. Except he doesn't commit violence, so he's not really a terrorist. He's a spy. Because he knows when you've been sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows when you've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake. He knows. And he could withhold toys if you're bad. What's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is to get kids to police themselves, to, in the back of their mind, go, I am going to do something terrible. I am going to poop over everything. Santa might not like that. I better not. This is how heaven works. You only get into heaven if you're good, and you get judged, if you're a Catholic, at the pearly gates before you get in. Now, you all may assume, oh, I'm good enough to get into heaven. That didn't used to be the case. Read your Dante. Everybody goes to hell, especially liars and cowards. They get really sent to hell. People who lie to friends, people who are cowards, and don't stand up for what's right, those people are the worst people. Because being a liar and betraying your friends sucks. And so the idea is that people police themselves. And finally, 3, the image of you can be bigger than the reality of you. That the people who are terrorized think you are tougher than you really are, that you are bigger than you really are. That is Osama bin Laden. All of this is Osama bin Laden. But this is the idea. Like, Osama bin Laden was an old man with kidney problems living in a cave in Afghanistan. And Americans were worried that he was going to destroy America. Like, think about how insane that statement is. That he wants to destroy America because he hates our democracy. He doesn't care about our democracy. He doesn't care at all. He's an old man living in a cave in Afghanistan. Like, really? This is the guy you're worried about? That's going to destroy America? This guy's not going to destroy America. He's an old man with kidney stones living in a cave in Afghanistan, one of the poorest countries in the world. This is not how you take over the world. But every time he sent out a message, every time he spoke, every time he said, I'm going to get you, Americans freaked out. A dude lit his underwear on fire on a plane once, and we have to get photographed naked going through to get on a plane. Another dude lit his shoe on fire once on a plane. We all have to take off our shoes to get on a plane. Like, think about that. Really? A guy lit his shoe on fire, and we have to all take off our shoes? Dudes shoot up schools, and we don't take their guns away. A dude lit his shoe on fire once, we take people's shoes away. Think about that for a second. Right or wrong, the image of the terrorist is bigger than the reality. And that's the way it is. And that's the advantage of terrorism. And that's why people do it. That's why it works. Terrorism does work because it gets into your mind. We're still in Afghanistan. 20 years, 17 years, whatever it is. After 9/11, we're still there. We have troops all over Africa. We have troops all over the Middle East. And the idea is to fight terrorism. To fight terrorists. Because we're scared of them. And so terrorism works. But there's a disadvantage to it. There's a huge disadvantage to terrorism. And we're going to talk about that in the next episode. And we're going to talk about what happens to the Assyrians in the next episode. Thank you.